Hi, Savvy Parents. This is Shannon McNulty, founder of our website to help you make smart legal and financial decisions about protecting your family. Today, I'm really excited to have our adoption attorney, who's a Savvy Parents expert, Robin Fleischner, and she's going to be talking to us today about the misconceptions around adoption. Thank you for joining us, Robin.
Thank you so much for having me. This is my first Facebook Live interview. I'm very excited.
It's very excited. We're so excited to have you here. So why don't you tell us, you've been practicing in New York City, you have an adoption adoption law practice, and also you do surrogacy law as well, right? And you've been doing this for quite a while.
Yes. Adoption is my life and my life's work. I adopted my two sons, who are now 32 and 33.
Wow.
And became an adoption attorney, hung out my own shingle when my younger son was a year old. And so it's really been my life's work.
That's so great. I love these personal stories of how people come into their professions when it just must have so much meaning for you.
It's a very personal practice. My clients and I have a very deep relationship. And it's an incredible privilege to be able to build families. The biggest change in the last decade is assisted reproduction, because when I adopted my kids over 30 years ago, in vitro fertilization, IVF, was not even available. There was one place in the United States that was starting to do IVF in Richmond, Virginia, and it was not available in New York or New Jersey. So the extraordinary burgeoning of assisted reproduction has changed the face of family formation tremendously in the last decade. So it's kind of nice for adoptive families, because families are formed in so many ways that adoption is out of the closet and not secret and just one form of family formation.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, especially here in New York, where you just have such a diversity of different people and different families, and families just come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes, and nowadays it's really common to have all kinds of different arrangements.
Absolutely. An area that has also changed the face of families is the Supreme Court's gay marriage decision, marriage equality, because we are seeing so many gay families today, and it's so. I feel so happy that gay people have the access to, the fulfillment of a family dream. The way. After the Supreme Court decision, it is a right. So that I love.
Yeah, that's great. I see that in my practice as well, that people are just so happy to finally be able to have those same rights, and to be able to either adopt or have some kind of a surrogacy arrangement. So it's really nice, and it's really rewarding work. So Robin is really quite the acclaimed adoption attorney, so we're really privileged to have her. She was the recipient of the Angels in Adoption Award from the Congressional Coalition on Adoption Institute, and a fellow of the American Academy of Adoption Attorneys and the American Academy of Assisted Reproductive Technology Attorneys, as well as other roles and accolades. So I just wanted to mention that because that's really impressive.
Thank you.
So I wanted to get to your latest article, which we just posted online, and it's the 5 most common misconceptions about New Jersey and New York private adoption. So you want to tell us about that? Like, why did you choose that topic, I guess, is one of my questions.
So I wanted to talk about the myths and realities of adoption. I think there is all kinds of sensational media coverage of adoption stories, and adoption is done in such an open and different way today than decades ago, that people really are surprised when they hear about the way to adopt. in the 21st century.
So how is that different? Can you tell us?
So, well, 50 years ago, adoption was very secretive, and adoption agencies literally had a door for the adoptive parents and a door for the birth parents, and they never met, they never got to know one another.
Yeah.
Adoptees didn't know their identity, they didn't know who their birth parents were, and today it's actually a mutual process. My clients actually create websites and connect with expectant moms online, and the birth mothers interview adoptive parents. It's very empowering for them to be able to choose the family for their child. And it's really important for adoptive families to be able to meet the birth family as well, so that they have all kinds of information for their child. It's really, the research over the last 30, 40 years shows that adoptive kids thrive when they know that they're adopted, that adoption is just out there and not a secret, and that they have as much information as possible about their background. It helps them.
Interesting. Well, that's great that there are these developments and that there's just more openness, and because I think that I would think that a lot of times I watched the movie Lion. I'm sure you saw the movie, and the questions that he had about his birth parents and just that kind of feeling of where did I come from and where are they, and I think these days of knowing that about your identity of where you did come from biologically is really helpful in terms of people's development and
Absolutely.
Their emotional development. So that was one of your misconceptions about adoptive kids don't feel accepted, which I thought was really interesting, because I think that's a common thing of people who are thinking about maybe adopting but think, well, I don't want a child who wouldn't feel like they belonged to us or felt like they were taken, they shouldn't be with them. So, and that would cause problems.
Exactly. I think that first of all, what I spoke about earlier, that that openness in adoption has really is the norm today, and is actually the research shows that that's best for adoptive kids. Adoptive kids do feel accepted because they've always known that they were adopted. And I also think with the different kinds of families today, adoptive kids don't feel weird. They feel part of the continuum of how families are shaped.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that, as there are these different types of families and we're open about it and accepting of all these different kind of really loving relationships, that, being an adoptive family is just a different way
Exactly.
to shape your family.
Exactly.
Okay, so some of the other misconceptions we have, this one I thought was interesting because I do hear this a lot, is there are no newborn babies available for adoption.
So this is a big fear of people when they are considering adoption. They're very worried that they won't be able to adopt a baby. And actually, my practice is limited to adoption of newborn babies. My clients literally connect with a pregnant woman, are often at the birth of the child, and take the baby home from the hospital when the baby's born. But there are many babies available for adoption, and it's a matter of it's a matter of being persistent and brave and putting yourself out there, and as much as possible, putting yourself online, letting everybody in your world know that you want to adopt. And there are my clients are very successful, believe it or not. So the fear that you won't be able to find a baby to adopt is unfounded.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. I think for a lot of parents who already have kids, sometimes they're looking to adopt another child, or maybe as their first child. How about if they're concerned about they have some kind of issue that they wouldn't be accepted as an adoptive parent?
Right, so that's also another big fear that people have. You don't have to be a perfect person in order to adopt. your passport to an adoption is called a home study. It's performed in New York. It can be performed by any licensed social worker, and in New Jersey it must be performed by a licensed adoption agency. But basically, it consists of, in addition to visiting you in your home, it's based on objective criteria. Are you'll have a letter from your doctor saying that you're physically able to parent a child. I have many adoptive parents who have a disability or have had an illness, cancer, and have been able to adopt. So you don't have to be in the ideal physical specimen. You just have to be physically able to care for a child. Criminal record is common, and that's often a question that comes up. If you were arrested for shoplifting when you were a kid, or even had an arrest for drunk driving or a drug arrest, you can, if you can show the agency, and also in New York State we have an additional hurdle. You have to be certified by our local family or surrogates court in addition to the home study.
Okay. So
in the home study you have to be able to show that you are drug or alcohol free and have overcome your whatever criminal record you have. The court will certify you as an adoptive parent.
It's an additional hurdle, but it's not necessarily.
Absolutely. And also age, people are very concerned about age. I would say that most of my clients are in their 40s because they may have spent their 30s trying to become pregnant. People typically choose adoption after failing at IVF, failing at fertility treatment, and that can take a long time. So most of my clients are in their 40s. Even if you're 50 years old, you can adopt. So prospective adoptive parents don't have to fear that they're too old to adopt a child. You have to show that you're physically able to parent, financially able to parent, that you're in good health, and have a stable home to provide for the child.
Okay. Well, that's, I think, encouraging for a lot of people. So one of, I think, the issues that you raised as well is the concern that the birth parent would be able to take back the child. And I could see that would just be so emotionally traumatic that people might not even want to.
So that's the TV movie. The TV movie is about the adoptive parents have the baby, the birth mother changes her mind, they have to give the baby back. Those are the cases that make headlines. First of all, in New York and New Jersey, we have very favorable laws for adoptive parents about terminating birth parents' rights. And typically, a birth mother, during the pregnancy, when she connects with adoptive parents, is showing the adoptive parents during the pregnancy her commitment to the adoption plan. Does she get back paperwork that we've sent her, social and medical history? Does she go for doctor's appointments? Does she have her medical records released to us? That's a big thing in adoption. Really, I explained to a birth mother that her medical records are the child's medical records, and so I obtained for the adoptive parents and for the adoptive child the birth mother's prenatal medical records. So if a birth mom is showing us her commitment throughout the pregnancy, she is likely to place the child for adoption. And under New York and New Jersey law, where typically, even if you find a baby out of state, typically you're adopting in a court where you reside. So typically, even if you live in New York or New Jersey, even if your baby is born in Arizona, we will be following the law. Mom, we're busy. We're busy with a Facebook Live interview. It'll have to wait. So we can end birth parents' rights very quickly.
Okay. But you kind of have an idea, I guess what you're saying is like during the process, there are red flags that go up. If
Absolutely.
The mother is likely to sort of change her mind on this.
For example, my clients are relying on me to vet the situation and see if it's a good prospective adoptive situation to proceed with. So for example, let's say birth mom says to me, I would like to place my child for adoption, but I live at home with my mother, and she is against the adoption. I would tell my clients, I think it's too risky to pursue that adoption, to live through that pregnancy in the hope of adopting that baby, because if birth mom is living with her mother and her mother really is against the adoption, she is likely to be influenced by her mother. This beautiful baby is born, and her mother's at the hospital saying, "How can you do this?" It's not likely for the adoption to take place. Whereas if a birth mother is living, most birth mothers actually are living alone and may have other kids and are in distress, and really can't care for the child. So that's an example of a prospective adopted situation that would look good. Birth fathers have rights too. I would say in more than half the cases, expectant moms do not name a father. And obviously, if the father is named, I will contact him and seek to end his rights. If I know who he is and where he is, I can always serve him with a notice of the adoption. A father doesn't have a veto right. He can't say, "You, birth mother, cannot place this child for adoption." He can say, "Here's where I work, here's where I live, here's my plan for raising my child myself," which is very uncommon.
Yeah.
So, we assess the
If they're
situation.
not in the picture, there's probably a reason why.
Exactly. So I will but if I spoke with a birth father, if I contacted a birth father and he said, I would like to raise my child, then that's a red flag, and I would say to my clients, we're not likely to terminate his rights. I would not pursue this.
Yeah. So how long does that process generally take between the time they start initiating this to the time that they, that they actually have a baby or have a successful adoption?
So I would say that my clients generally adopt within a year to a year and a half of starting the process. It's being in the right place at the right second, and not giving up.
Yeah.
You can get discouraged if you're talking to birth mothers and nothing pans out, or if you're advertising online and you're not getting calls. It just takes one lucky email, one lucky phone call to change your life. And that's what you have to keep thinking. But people who proactively pursue adoption will adopt, will be successful.
Interesting. That's really great to know. So I think the last issue here that you raise is the effect on your life of an open adoption, because they seem to be more prevalent now these days. These open adoptions are more common, and what kind of effect is that going to have on your life, and is that going to cause problems in your life?
Yeah. So, often when I meet with a family for the first time, they're fearful about open adoption. They feel as though open adoption will intrude on their lives, intrude on their child's life, and actually that is not the case. So the typical adoption scenario today is that adoptive parents and birth parents, or at least birth mom, really get to know one another during the pregnancy. My experience is that birth mothers want the adoptive parents to have, and the adoptive child to have, their information, their identifying information. Often adoptive parents don't disclose their identity to the birth mother. Sometimes they do, but it's not a requirement. And it depends on the comfort level with the birth mother, and sometimes the birth mother will insist. So it depends on the particular case. But adoptive parents and birth parents are very much in a relationship during the pregnancy. When the baby's born, we've given a hospital plan to the hospital to let the hospital know what the birth mother wishes. Some birth mothers want the adoptive parents at the birth. Some of them want the adoptive parents to care for the baby at the hospital. I would say typically a birth mother will want to care for the baby in the hospital with the adoptive parents. But they've really gotten to know one another, and a relationship of love and trust develops. Then after the baby is in the adoptive home, the baby goes home from the hospital with the adoptive parents. It would be typical to exchange like texts and emails, photos over the years.
Okay.
In a handful of adoptions I have, there's post-placement visiting, maybe like once or twice a year. The birth family and adoptive family visit. even though a lot of birth moms ask for that, it's still rare to really have an ongoing visitation that lasts over the years. Usually, it doesn't usually last for many years, and then it's all going to depend on the child. Some adoptive kids really are curious and long for some kind of in-person relationship with the birth parent, and many do not. So it's going to depend on the child, and the overarching standard in all of these cases is the best interest of the child. So the adults really have to abide by that.
Well, this has been great. I really appreciate it. I think all of our viewers really appreciated our discussion here today and all of this information. There's so much great information, and I think that anybody who's out there and considering adoption, that you've definitely allayed some of their fears and addressed some of their concerns. I know that, for me, this was really informative as well. So do you want to tell our viewers how they can reach out to you if they wanted to get more information?
Absolutely. So you can get a lot of good information actually on my website, which is adoptsurrogatelaw.com. I have a blog that I write about every 6 weeks that has a lot of personal stories in it, and I am also available by phone and happy to speak anytime. I wish you luck in your adoption quest. If you want to adopt, you can adopt. That is what I would say.
Such a great message. And also, if you are interested as well in surrogacy, Robin can help you with that as well. So I hope you've enjoyed our conversation here today, and we will see you soon. Take care.